She didn't ask, wait, or tell anyone. Camilla just stepped in and seized everything. All of the royal assets went missing overnight and then showed up on her private estate, where they were relabeled, resealed, and claimed as hers. But she didn't expect that a royal guard was already following her every move. She wasn't only exposed by sundown, she was officially banned from all royal properties, archives, and assets for the rest of her life. Before we show you the precise moment the guard locked the gates and the line he said that ended her regal access for good, tell us where you are in the world. Stay right here, click the subscribe and bell symbol, and don't forget to like the video. Camilla assumed the crown still belonged to her, but now, the royal guard got it back. The Windsor custodial wing never really slept. Before the sun came up, the halls were alive with quiet movement. Canastas moved crates, archivists logged items, and guards paced stone thresholds lined with gilded plaques and tillants. Sergeant Elias Thorne stood at Station 3 with a clipboard in one hand and a black glove in the other. Coldstream Guard, 13 years, decorated in helmet, now stationed in a royal wing that most people didn't know existed, the kind of posting where silence was more important than ceremony, where what you safeguarded was more important than who witnessed you do it. The Royal Custodial Division wasn't a place to store things. It was a safe place for the Crown's physical legacy. Things weren't merely locked up here. They were kept, organized, coded, and ready for shows all over the Commonwealth. This week, 6 containers, boxes with red wax on them, and Queen Elizabeth's last seal were all ready to be sent to Balmoral. Scheduled departure from Uranuco via bonded transport, escort details still to come. Elias turned back to the last dispatch list. It said that containers 440-2 were reserved for transfer and were classified Coronation objects. The steel bay that should have contained them was empty behind its iron gate. No one reported a break or tampered with the padlocks. They were just gone. 6 containers were missing. There were no recorded signatures, and the tracking system was flashing green as if nothing had happened. He grimaced and leaned into the security terminal, where he tapped through the movement logs by time. No problems, no warnings. Then he switched on access history. 03:42 a.m. Sector B, clearance override CM19. ID for clearance, CM19. Camilla Windsor, a former consort, has a legacy override level of authorization and is being sent back home on personal orders. 3 weeks ago, that level of clearance had been put on hold, and it was officially permanent. He got the revocation memo from Prince William's office, which was his own order. There was no doubt about it, but nevertheless the system had given the go-ahead for movement, past cameras, past custodians, and past him. He opened the nearby CCTV viewer and went back to U330, grainy video of staff members strolling silently through the wing, 2 men in uniforms pushing containers in low light. One person had a folder full of papers, another person scanned a fob at every gate. Camilla was walking behind them in a charcoal coat and gloves. In the video, she didn't say anything. She didn't have to. She was in charge just by being there. But no cameras caught her leaving. They only showed the instant the gates closed again and the logs went blank. Elias went back even further. First 2 weeks, then 3. His jaw got stiff. This was not the first time. Same time frame, same clearance code. He found 4 different overnight entries, smaller removals, a jeweled scepter case, the Queen's personal correspondence box from her Diamond Jubilee year, 2 ceremonial mantles from the 1977 state visits, and all of them were coded under the same authorization, signed out to Balmoral, and moved before anyone could ask questions. He opened the master catalog and checked every item that had been marked for CM19 access against the list. The list was longer than he thought it would be. 23 items, not just heirlooms, but also things that characterized what the crown meant to people who remembered when it seemed untouchable. This wasn't a spur-of-the-moment decision. It was planned out. Elias reached for the locked control panel and typed in the command line, "This is Thorne. We've had a full custodial breach. 6 crates were taken out with a suspended ID. I have the footage of the movement." There was a break. Then a voice came through that was deep, distinct, and heavy. "If that's true, Sergeant, it's seizure." The roads to Balmoral weren't meant for convoys, at least not the royal kind. Not the kind that came without heraldry, press, or protection. But they came right after sunrise. 3 unmarked trucks drove up the back service road of the estate in a line. Engines were quiet under the heavy Highland mist. They went around the main drive and past the wooden gate near the lower conservatory. They parked in a gravel courtyard with only a little brass plaque that said Auxiliary Estate Storage. No royal banners, no security escort, and no digital trace. Camilla was alone in the lead truck, which used to be the Queen Consort's. She didn't wear any fancy clothes. Instead, she donned a navy blue travel coat, leather gloves, and a black cashmere scarf that was carefully wrapped around her neck. She looked at the windows of the estate house once, but no one was behind them. That was how she liked it. When the truck stopped with a hiss, a small group of private handlers came out. They were men in dark green uniforms with no patches. They started to unload one by one, crate after crate. There were wooden frames with iron clamps, crown seals imprinted near the base, and inventory tags hidden behind brass brackets. But those were quickly taken off and replaced with handwritten paper slips that said Private Archive CW. Inside the garage, her aides arranged the contents in rows. A pair of crimson velvet coronation chairs from the Queen's 1953 ceremony. The Queen's silver and onyx travel diary case once stored beneath the Sandringham desk. A set of ceremonial vehicle keys tagged for the late Queen's Range Rover fleet. Dozens of handwritten invitations from Queen Elizabeth's last official year. Silk-lined garment boxes still bearing dry cleaning tickets dated a decade back. But the age of the things didn't matter. It was what they stood for. Camilla went into the garage just as the last crate was being laid down. There was a subtle smell of varnish and diesel in the air. She didn't stop to look at the things. She just turned to her assistant and stuck out her hand. She was given a leather folder to hold. She took it out. There was a single-page document within called the Personal Custody Ledger, Legacy Compartment. It didn't have a signature, so she signed it. "Sort everything by the room it came from," she replied in a calm voice. "Then close it up. I want these put away by noon." The aide was unsure. "Mom, this goes over the private estate limit." Even then, her voice didn't get louder. "Do it." The helper bowed a little and walked back. She pointed to the crate with the Queen's coronation veil and turned to one of the handlers. "That one goes last." The clouds outside got lower. The gravel was stained with light rain. A member of the kitchen staff at the estate quietly called a cousin who worked as an assistant footman at Windsor and said only one thing: "She's emptied the garage." By lunchtime, the news had made it to the cleaning staff. As Sergeant Thorne read through a new courier log, a dozen staff members stood quietly around his desk. Not by Parliament or royal order, but by the lady who used to be wedded to the crown. The Queen's legacy collection had been shifted. And suddenly, Windsor was missing more than just things. It was missing the last tangible sign of its queen. When the attendant came in, Prince William didn't glance up. All he did was hold out his hand. The report was put in without a sound. There was no cover page or commentary, just a 6-page event file with a red mark on the corner that said Crown Inventory Breach, Class 1. He read every word without blinking. 6 containers for the Windsor Custodial Wing, registered heirlooms that can be traced back to Queen Elizabeth II's own collection, removed without an audit, logged under a suspended clearance, transported to Balmoral with Camilla's signature, and filed under the heritage compartment. He flipped to the following page, which had a list of items: the coronation veil, travel keys, the original ceremonial upholstery, estate emblems, handwritten letters, and unique royal stationery. He took a deep breath, and then glanced across the long wood table at the Marshal of Property Records, who was sitting 3 chairs down. "Did she ask for a transfer protocol?" "No, sir. It's an emergency reallocation." "No, sir. Then she's not collecting," he answered in a low voice. "She's taking it away." No one answered. Princess Anne put her file down and closed it across the table. "She thinks we've erased her, so now she's erasing us." William didn't say anything. Instead, he grabbed a thin black folder to his left, opened the red ribbon, and took out a printed sheet that said, "Ordinance 17, Heritage Containment, Emergency Mandate. All royal property, whether real or symbolic, will be frozen until a quick check of the custodial integrity can be made. No one who is not currently on the royal register may receive, claim, reallocate, or restore an object." At the bottom, he wrote his name. "Seal it and send it to Balmoral by encrypted relay. This is only for the Royal Asset Division, starting now." The Lord Chamberlain bent over. "Are you starting a retrieval detail?" "Not yet. We check the inventory first, and then we take it back." "A break. Then who should we send?" William didn't think twice. Thorne. Sergeant Elias Thorne had been waiting right outside the room. He stepped inside without saying a word when the doors opened. His boots clicked once on the gleaming floor. William got up. "You've seen the video. You know how big it is." Elias nodded once. "Yes, sir. This isn't a recovery. It's a verification. You will report directly to this table. There will be no confrontation unless you are interrupted." "I get it." William gave him a sealed packet. The outside has the royal cipher and an official crown order, with the line for execution under silent etiquette. William said, Get the truth." Elias took it, put it in his uniform, and nodded again. The meeting ended. The marshal said, "You'll be met by an unmarked convoy at the outer hangar. There will be no press and no markings." "Good," Elias said. "Most of the time, you don't need to see the things that are most important." As he walked across the courtyard to the car, the clouds above Windsor got thicker. Far to the north, in the shadow of a Highland estate, the things that used to belong to a king were inside containers that were no longer owned by the crown. As the convoy reached the top of the last hill above Balmoral, rain tapped softly on the windshield. 3 cars that aren't identified are lined up in a staggered way. There were no sirens, no flags, and no proclamation, just black wheels on wet gravel, going up into silence. Sergeant Elias Thorne was in the front car, and his face was hard to interpret. As they got closer to the south door, 2 guards from the Royal Asset Division looked around the access boundary behind him. There were no security issues or problems, just one steward with a clipboard and a phony smile. They didn't stop to say hello. The estate rose ahead, gray stone covered in mist, and the chimneys were smoking softly against the cloudy sky. But they didn't want the main house. Thorne's orders were clear: check, write down, and contain if there was a breach. He got out of the car and pointed to the back detail. They all walked toward the auxiliary storage hall, which isn't very well known and is hidden behind a line of trees. It has a small brass plate that says "Private Inventory, Estate Use Only." The steward walked up and cleared his throat. "We weren't told that you weren't on the estate register." Elias opened an envelope that had been sealed and held up a page. The man read it with his lips shut. Elias said, "This is a crown order," in a monotone voice, "signed under Ordinance 17, which goes into effect right away. We are starting an asset verification with full custodial authority. I was told these things were family heirlooms." Elias didn't say anything. He moved forward. It was colder inside the hall than we thought it would be. There were rows of crates around the walls, stacked too high and spaced just enough. And not just crates, there were seats, cabinets, jewelry stands, and even a black lacquered box with the king's insignia half covered in dust. He moved with experienced skill, his gloved fingers brushing lightly over the metal tags and silk wraps. One of the guards opened the lid of a package. Inside, the copy of the state crown from Queen Elizabeth's Golden Jubilee show is safe and sound in bespoke velvet. Another box held her crowning veil, which was still folded over a linen-wrapped shape. The fibers of the veil still smelled faintly of lavender. A third trunk housed 3 royal seals that she used on her last trips abroad. Each one had a faint register code burned into the wood underneath. Elias looked at his comms unit. "This is Thor. We have full physical proof. A state crown replica, a veil, sovereign seals, and ceremonial registry objects. They're all here, stored off manifest. There was no transit declaration, and they were coded under repatriation, but not under sovereign oversight." Static made a noise for a moment. Then the command said, "Received. Proceed with silent audit. No removal. No contact. Report all additional inventory. Confirm. Next step once full manifest is matched." Elias gazed at the rows of cartons again. Things that were supposed to be part of the national memory are now stacked up like old furniture. He pushed the button again. It's no longer private. She walked in with steps that were too sharp for the stone below them. Camilla's travel coat was still wet from the mist outdoors, and its collar felt tight against her throat. A Windsor tartan scarf hung loosely from one side, but it didn't make her appearance any less harsh. 2 aides stood by the door behind her, unsure if they should go in with her. At first, Sergeant Elias Thorne didn't look up. He was looking at the catalog number that was stenciled on the side of a ceremonial travel cabinet that used to be in Queen Elizabeth's motor suite. He just turned to make sure that the person coming in matched the voice he had already heard echoing through the hall. Camilla's voice was sharp as she said, "So, this is what it's come to. Soldiers come to my door to count chairs and open crates." Elias did not respond. He straightened up straight and closed the cabinet. "We're doing a full verification of removed custodial assets by order of the sovereign," he remarked calmly. "No items will be seized, just documented, containment only." "Containment?" She laughed quickly and sharply. "These aren't weapons or criminals. They're my late husband's memory, furniture, clothes, and other things that were important to him and me during his reign." He didn't move. Items in their royal property, custodial trust, and crown cultural preservation. Camilla walked further into the hall, and her boots clicked on the stone. Elias replied softly, "You can't touch them, and you can't move them." She stopped just short of the crate that held the coronation veil. She didn't say anything for a long time. "Then I had every right. I had these things for more than 10 years. I held that veil in my hands the day Elizabeth died. I was the one who sorted through her things while the rest of you were playing succession politics. I was the one who wrote the letters to the charities. I was the one who stayed when the whole country held its breath." He didn't say anything. "I didn't steal," she said in a hiss. "I protected. You took things without a proper clearance. No ledger, no witness, no sovereign sign-off. That's not protection, Mom. That's breach." She looked at him. "I don't need anyone's permission to keep the legacy." "You do," he said, "when it doesn't belong to you." Her mouth pinched. "Sergeant, I know the language you're trained to use. I know what containment means and what breach means, but I also know what loyalty used to mean. These things were left to rot in crates, forgotten in stone basements and steel cabinets. I gave them a place and respect." Elias's voice didn't get louder. "Custodial law doesn't care about feelings. Then what does it answer to?" He looked her in the eye. "The crown." Camilla's fingers wrapped around the edge of the trunk that was closest to her. She remarked in a sinister voice, "You're not just here to count. You came to make me look bad." "No, Mom," Elias said. "I've come to record what should never have been moved." She moved closer to him, angry now. "You think your title gives you the right to judge?" "No, Mom. I think what you did just took you out of the one title that ever mattered." That landed, not with a bang, but with weight. Camilla's breathing got slower. She set it up again. When she spoke again, her voice had changed. It was softer, more precise, and sounded like someone who had spent decades learning how to deal with royal procedure. "Sergeant, I'm using Article 6 of the Consort Retention Clause. Materials that a sitting consort directly handled or archived while in office stay under transitional custody for a period of," Elias remarked without emotion. "Article 6 was repealed in 2019. Your late husband signed the Heritage Accountability Reform." Her face became still. "Mom, there is no transitional custody. There is only legal transfer, which needs the approval of the sovereign or a breach. You chose the latter." She opened her mouth and then shut it. She let go of the edge of the trunk with her fingertips. She gazed around the room for the first time since she got there, not at him or the containers, but at the space itself, as if she were seeing it for what it really was. Not her legacy, not her archive, simply proof. And then, in the quiet that followed, a faint electronic voice resonated along the hall. "Gate lock, remote trigger." Elias had typed it in without moving his hand from his side. The estate was closed. Camilla quickly turned to face the entrance, but there were no aides there. Instead, a guard from the outside post was calmly standing in the hallway. The quiet came back. It wasn't a big deal. It wasn't really loud. It was the sound of the protocol locking in. The rain had come with them to the south. By the time the security caravan got to Windsor's east annex, the black windows of the last car were blurry with streaks of water. There were no flashing lights and no crowd. The palace knew how to take in someone who was being held without charge. Quietly, clinically, and without the press finding out. Camilla left without putting up a fight. It was hard to tell what she was thinking. She didn't look angry or sorry, simply blank, like a king without a country. She was led through the staff hallway, which was once only used by visiting heads of state, and into the green drawing room, where the tribunal had already met. 4 people were waiting. Prince William stood by the fire with a thin file under his arm. Princess Anne sat next to the Lord Chamberlain with her arms folded. The Marshal of Custodial Affairs maintained a leather-bound register open and ready at the end of the table. Elias Thorne stood quietly on the side, still wearing his full guard outfit. There were no titles or greetings. Camilla sat across from the others with her hands in her lap. The folder was opened by William. He started without any fanfare. Crates 447 through 452, registered to the Royal Custodial Trust. Items taken from Windsor during curfew hours without your previously suspended clearance. No ledger, no permission to move, no royal sign-off. He raised his head. You told private agents to take crown property from Balmoral and put it away under private seals. Camilla spoke softly. I brought back what was lost. Princess Anne cut in, her voice sharp. You said what was saved. I kept it, Camilla answered, sounding more angry now. Before the new government put it all in bubble wrap and used it as museum bait, these weren't relics. They were things we lived with and were part of who we were, Anne said. You mean who you were? William stayed still. Sentiment doesn't make seizure right. They would have been put in a list, Camilla said quietly, folded into the system and taken out of context. William turned the page. You took away the Queen's coronation veil, her keys to the motor fleet, and the Jubilee crown replica. Camilla, that's not context. That's crown inventory. And you knew it. Her jaw got stiff. "I loved her. Then you should have respected what she left behind." Silence came back, the kind that only gets worse when there's nothing left to protect. The marshal cleared his throat and leaned forward with a leather-bound notebook. "Just so you know, Your Majesty, the full inventory count shows that 23 items were taken over 6 weeks. This isn't a one-time thing. It's happening all the time." William nodded once, but he didn't take his eyes off of Camilla. Princess Anne was next. Her voice was calm yet cold. The coronation veil wasn't just fabric. It was worn when she became queen. The Commonwealth exhibition in 3 months wants it to show that things are still the same across the realm. Now we have to explain why it almost disappeared into private storage. The Lord Chamberlain said in a low voice, "If we let this stand as a precedent, every former consort and every displaced royal could say they had a personal connection to the archive and want it removed. The archive loses its meaning. The institution becomes negotiable." William looked back at Camilla. "It's not about your grief or your service. It's about whether the crown lasts longer than the people who wear it." Camilla's hands shook a little in her lap. "I was trying to save it," Anne said. "You were trying to own it." The Lord Chamberlain leaned in. "Should we vote now?" William put up his hand. "Not yet." He looked back at Camilla. "This isn't a criminal case. You're not on trial, but what you did wasn't personal. It was constitutional. You moved property that belonged to the government in violation of the law." Anne looked at Camilla. "And what will you vote for, Princess? That I be forgotten?" Anne didn't blink. "No, from access." The marshal wrote down what was said, the pen faintly scratching across the vellum. William shut the folder. "The council will talk about it. You will stay on the grounds until a decision is made." Camilla didn't say anything. There were 2 guards on either side of the room as she stood. Elias didn't move, but he watched her as she walked by. She never turned around. The doors behind her closed quietly, not with a bang, and the palace went back to being silent, the type of silence that always comes before something ends. When Camilla walked inside the council chamber, the morning sun was shining in. This time, there were no guards around her. Only a marshal officer walked 1 step behind her, holding a sealed letter, and not saying anything. Camilla's footfall made a slight sound on the checkerboard floor, but no one looked up until she got to the table in the middle. William was already sitting at the head of the table. He didn't have a crown or a sash. All he had was a fitted navy coat and a thin binder in front of him. 2 men of the custodial division stood on either side of Sergeant Elias Thorne at the edge of the room. The register book was closed and sat on the platform next to him, waiting for one more entry. Camilla sat down. William opened the book. He started by saying, "The council met at 06:45 in a calm voice, looked at video, registry violations, custodial records, and the failed defense of moving without permission while under suspended authority." He put 1 piece of paper on the table. "This is the decision." Camilla looked at it but didn't touch it. William's words were obvious. By order of the current monarch, all titles, privileges, and custodial rights that the former queen consort had are now gone. She will never be able to access royal estates, documents, or assets again. A break. Then he said, "This decision is not disciplinary. It is custodial. It recognizes breach, not intent." Camilla's lips parted a little, but there was no sound. She peered across the table at Anne and the chamberlain, but all she saw was quiet. "Yinoi?" she finally asked, her voice so low that it was hard to hear. William looked her in the eye. "Forever." There was a faint sound that sounded like a breath caught behind tight teeth. Elias moved forward. He took 2 things out of a little case, her clearance badge, which no longer had scan access, and the cipher ring she used to sign royal orders. He carefully set them down on the table next to her. "Protocol says that insignia must be returned," he stated. Camilla looked at them for a moment, her eyes going back and forth between remembrance and finality. Then, cautiously, she stretched out and took her hand. There was a soft metallic sound when the ring fell off. It made a noise when it hit the wood. The badge came next. Elias took them both up without any fuss, put them in the black velvet pouch, and closed it with the silver thread drawstring. William got up. "Take her to the west gate." No one got up with her. There was no speech after that. Only the quiet shuffling of shoes on polished stone as she was led out of the room. Not by the side door or the staff corridor, but through the west gate, where the Queen had left for her last Commonwealth trip. When the exterior door opened, the hallway was filled with light. Outside, there were no cameras or reporters, only a parked vehicle with opaque windows. Camilla didn't cry or say anything, but as the wind lifted the hem of her coat, she paused for a moment and looked back at the palace. No one waved or looked up. The flag was still flying high above them because the monarchy had not collapsed. It had just shut a door. Evening fell over Windsor like a breath held. The rain had stopped, but there were still signs of it. Fine mist on the windows, and the smell of wet stone coming from the inner courtyards. The lights were low in the royal custodial wing, and the halls resonated with the peaceful sound of restoration. Sergeant Elias Thorne proceeded along the middle hallway by himself, holding the last crate in his gloved hands. He stopped in front of the vault with the sign Crown Archive A, typed in the access code, and waited for the steel to open with its usual hydraulic hiss. Inside there were shelves with velvet trays, temperature-controlled exhibits, and sealed glass cases that weren't only for show, but also for remembering. Princess Anne was already inside. She was wearing a heavy riding coat and gloves tucked under one arm. She was reading the re-entry ledger with reading glasses on her nose. She looked up when Elias came in, but she didn't smile. "Is this the last one?" "Yes, ma'am," he said. "Coronation veil, closed with the original archival thread." She nodded once and moved to the side. He took the crate to its allocated spot on shelf H, position 2. Then he cautiously opened it to see the delicate folds of fabric, which still smelled faintly of lavender from years ago. He carefully picked it up, put it on its silk form, and walked back. Anne walked up to the window. "She wore that the day everything changed," she stated in a hushed voice. "It didn't belong to anyone, but it held all of us." Elias looked at the veil, "And now it's where it should be." Anne's face changed a little. It wasn't quite a grin, but it was near to relief. "Do you know what would have happened if this had stayed missing? The Commonwealth exhibition opens in 12 weeks. Delegates from 43 nations. The veil was the centerpiece, proof that what she built survived her. Without it," she stopped talking for a moment, then said quietly, "we would have shown them an empire that couldn't even protect its own memory." Elias didn't say anything, but he kept looking at the delicate cloth. He had seen a lot in his life, like weaponry, battlefields, and important and unimportant occasions. But this was not the same. It wasn't simply about keeping it safe. It showed that the system could still work even if the people inside it didn't. Someone behind spoke. She would have liked it. Prince William walked in without any fuss, with his hands in his coat pockets and his hair still wet from the courtyard. He walked over to the case and looked at it quietly before reaching for the ledger. "Put your initials next to the item that was returned." He looked at Elias once. "You did what most people wouldn't." "I followed the seal," Elias said. "Not the person who is wearing it." William nodded slowly. "That's what keeps the monarchy together." He looked at Anne. "We'll make the archive safer. No key will ever go missing again." Anne didn't answer. She didn't have to. She had already spoken everything she needed to say. Elias leaned out and closed the glass cover. A soft click. The seal worked. Bells rang outside for the sunset hour. Guards changed places. The rain fell softly against the windows that were high up, and somewhere in the countryside, a woman who had once sat next to a throne was now sitting in quiet, with no way to go to it, no sign, and no way to come back. Was the banishment fair or too harsh for the family? Should a queen consort ever be sent away for breaching the rules? Or was this the only way to keep the crown's legacy safe? Please leave your opinions in the comments. We read every single one. If you think no title should be beyond accountability, hit that like button immediately. Make sure you have the bell symbol switched on, and share this tale with someone who still thinks that legacy must be earned, not taken. We've already shown our other Royal Guard stories. Next, go ahead and watch them.